بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We ended off last week with lesson 8, which dealt with cleanliness, tahara, and tonight we continue with lesson 9, rather 19, not 9. Last week was lesson 18, was cleanliness. Tonight is lesson 19, which is najasa, impurity. So, after we had a look at how important cleanliness is as part of Islam, tonight we're going to look at impurities, or najasa, is the Arabic word. Now, it is important to note that in order for a person to perform ibadah, not just salah, any other form of ibadah, or most forms of ibadah, like the Quran, reading the Quran, tawaf, etc. Person touching the Quran, a person must have wudu. So when a person must have wudu and a person must be clean. So when we say that a person has to be clean, it means that there are no dirt or impurities on him because he's clean. Being clean means there's no najasa. If there is najasa present, then a person is not clean. Right? So in terms of the kitab, it gives us a list here of the different kinds of impurities and najasat that we get. So this is on page 71, the book Al-Mufida of Sheikh Muhammad Amin Fakir. And number 1, inshallah, we'll just go through the list of impurities. The first one is anything related to a dog and pig. So the dog and the pig. Anything that comes from them or touching them or them touching you, the touching you, licking you, anything to do with the dog and the pig, number 1. Number 2 says, if an animal is slaughtered, or any dead creature, rather, any dead creature, except man, locust, and fish. Right? Because even if we find a locust or we find a fish that is dead, it is still regarded as clean, because you can eat, because you can still eat it. Right? That's part of the reason why. But whenever an animal that we can eat, for example, sheep, goats, cows, bulls, etc. These animals that we eat, when they are slaughtered incorrectly, right? They're not slaughtered properly according to the Sharia, according to Islam, then that is also one example. So those animals that is lawful for us to eat, that is slaughtered and wasn't slaughtered correctly, properly in terms of Islamic law, in terms of Islam. Right. So it's all dead creatures except mankind, fish and locust. The next one says excrement, feces. Right? So that would include the excrements of humans and animals. Right? That is regarded as najasa. Number 4 is blood. blood is also considered to be najasa or najis. Um, However, if it is in small amount, then it is overlooked. However, if it gets more, then it's najis and you have to wash it off. So, for example, if a person is wearing a shirt and he has a cut, somewhere here on his arm, perhaps, um, and there's blood that comes from there. If it's a small amount of blood, then it's overlooked. If not, then you should rather take the shirt off and wash the area. For example, if we're speaking of blood and it's maybe one drop of blood, for example, 1 or 2 drops of blood, that is still overlooked, right? Um, but more than that, then it's best to take off that item, that shirt or the pants, etc., and then to wash it or change it. So blood. Then we have um, all fluids that intoxicate, right? Intoxicating fluids or drink, liquor. So, for example, wine. Wine is considered to be, it is an intoxicant, hence it is considered to be najis as well. So, if wine is spilt on a person, or however that might happen, then that is regarded as najis. Whatever comes from the stomach, for example, if a person vomits or he vomited, whatever comes out, that the vomit that came out, that is regarded as najis as well. And okay, then there's another two that is mentioned here, and that deals with the fluid that is excreted or that comes from the body. So, with regard to the private part, so there is something called, we have madhi and then we have wadi. So madhi with a dal, madhi, and then wadi with a dal, wadi. So the first one, madhi, it is a sticky whitish fluid that flows from the genitals because of sexual desire. Now, unfortunately, this is a bit private or intimate, but this is part of the deen, and this is how we live and how we keep ourselves clean, because this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created mankind. And the deen covers every aspect of insan, all avenues of our lives, even when it comes to our desires and the lawful desires that a man has for that a husband has for his wife. So when husband and wife are, let's call it, getting jiggy with it, or when husband and wife is intimate, then the body releases a whitish sticky fluid. Now, normally that wetness or that fluid that is released comes out before for example, before the male private part releases or ejaculates sperm. There is a sticky fluid that comes out before that. So that is referred to as madhi, and that is najis. So when that happens, that is regarded as najasa. If it touches the clothes or the underpants or the underwear, then the underwear has to be changed and it has to be cleaned as well. And the area, the body part or the private part itself, that area also has to be washed and cleaned. So that is prior to ejaculation. Then that is madhi. Then we have something called wadi, which is also a whitish kind of a fluid, and it is also comes out from the discharge from the private parts, the genitals of insan. But this is not on account of lust or desire. This is rather on account of some ailment or sickness that the person has, or when lifting a heavy object. And I think that is one of the common ways in which wadi happens, where the body releases fluid from the private part, not because of desire or lust, or because then that would be madhi. But when lifting a heavy object, then it feels almost as if something was released from the body, from the private parts. So both those two instances, madhi and wadi, is regarded as najasa, right? And right, regarded as najasa. Now, those are the list of. There might be one or two extra, but these are the most common. Right. So now that we know what is najasa, now the next question is, how do we clean it? How do you clean yourself from najasa? So first of all, first step is you have to remove any najasa that is there. Right? So a person takes water, he takes soap, he takes a cloth, or he takes etc. He takes something, he takes water, and he has to clean the area, he has to remove the najasa. Right? Whether it be the clothes that is dirty or the body of the person that is dirty, we first have to clean the area. Then after we clean it, we then rinse it with clean waters. Like when a person takes a bath or a person takes a shower, for example, if there might be any najasa, then you wash it with soap and water. Afterwards, you rinse your body, etc. So in that way, we clean the body or the clothes until it is clean. Right? I think that speaks for itself. That's fairly straightforward. Now, the next question is, very importantly, we come to the term or the word hadath. What does hadath mean? And I'm sure we've heard this word many times before. We've come across it a lot of times. And when we speak of hadath, we refer to a state in which a person is. Right? It is a specific condition or a specific state that a person finds himself in. Right? So hadath also we will translate as a ritual impurity. So not just najasa is physical impurity, whereas hadath is also a type or kind of impurity, but it is a ritual impurity, not necessarily physical impurity. There's a difference between the two. So we can say a ritual or a spiritual impurity. Right? The word hadath. And if a person is in a state of hadath, because remember it is a condition, it is a state within which you find yourself. If a person finds him or herself in the state of hadath, then we have to clarify, because we divide hadath in two. The one is what we call the small hadath, and the other one would be the big hadath. So small hadath refers to the state or the condition that a person finds himself in when he is in need of taking an wudu. So if small hadath is present, then the way to remove the small hadath is by taking wudu, abdestning. big hadath, if that is present, then the way to remove and to come out of the condition of being in a big hadath, of forward hadath, is what is required is to take a fard ghusl. Very important. A fard ghusl, with the emphasis on the word fard, because as we all know, we get a fard ghusl and we get a sunnah ghusl or a nafil ghusl. But inshallah, we're getting to a ghusl itself. That is a separate discussion. For now, the important part is when a person finds himself in the state of big hadath, the way to come out of it is, and to clean yourself is, you are required, it is necessary, it is compulsory on the individual to take a fard ghusl. Alright? So now, let's give some examples of the two. So the first one, which is small hadath, would be, for example, where a person is in need of taking wudu. So that means if I have wudu and I break my wudu for whatever reason, whether I went to the bathroom, whether I performed number one or number two, whether I touched a lady, whether I broke my wudu because of sleeping, falling asleep, whichever one of those reasons it is, when that happens, then I am in a state of small hadath because I don't have wudu anymore. And I then need to take a new wudu to remove the state of small hadath. Is that clear? Everyone understand? Again, these are things that we maybe, we've been doing it for years, and we've kind of, not taken note of it or taken it for granted. But that's part of the beauty of, when a person learns and you attend a class and we study and we learn, then we appreciate all these small things. And especially a person who is a revert, who has embraced Islam, this, inshallah ta'ala, will help a lot to understand, everything. So that is small hadath. I broke my wudu because I broke a wind and I need to take a new wudu. The big hadath is where a person the husband and wife had relations, and husband and wife had intimacy, and as a result of that, both of them, both the husband and the wife, find themselves in the state of big hadath. And the way to remove that is to take a fard ghusl. Another example could be of big hadath, which is aside from husband and wife sleeping together. Another one would be where a person has a ihtilam, person has a wet dream. When a person wakes up from a wet dream, or after experiencing a wet dream, then that person finds himself in the state of big hadath. Hence, the way to remove it is, it's a compulsory, it's wajib on that person, it's fard on that person to then go immediately, as soon as possible, take a fard ghusl. And that's also a very important thing. Very important part of tahara is that once a person finds himself or herself in a state of big hadath, this is now, for example, when husband and wife has been together, or if a person has ihtilam, or if a lady that had a hayd, her menstrual cycle, her hayd has come to an end, and she is, as we would say here in Cape Town, says nou weer in. Right? She's, her hayd is finished, she's clean now, she's in, and she has to then take a fard ghusl. Right? That's also another example. So that is very important. And we should hasten when we find ourselves in the condition of big hadath, then we should hasten to take a fard ghusl as soon as possible. Inshallah ta'ala. Right. So I hope that explains a very important concept of hadath, which means ritual impurity, as opposed to physical impurity, which would be najasa. And we divide hadath into two, small hadath and big hadath. Small hadath is where a person is in need of taking another wudu, a new wudu. He has to take wudu again. And big hadath is where a person has to take, it is compulsory on that person, wajib, that he or she then takes a fard ghusl. Right. After taking the wudu, or alternatively taking the fard ghusl, that person is then in a state of cleanliness again. Right. I think that should cover hadath. Now the next question is, the author says that if we've identified that there is najasa present, or if we've identified that I find myself in the state of small hadath or big hadath, I now either need to take wudu, or I need to take a fard ghusl, or if there's physical najasa on me, I need to wash my clothes, or I need to wash my body clean. I need to remove the najasa. Now, how do we do this? By using water. You know, when you take wudu, we're taking wudu with water. If you take a fard ghusl, then you're taking a shower. But a fard ghusl is not just taking a shower. A fard ghusl is taking a shower with a very specific niyyah attached to it. That, Ya Allah, this shower, this wash that I'm going to give me now is because of it being a fard ghusl. Right? We have to add that niyyah. The niyyah is very important. We'll get to the niyyah, inshallah ta'ala. But a fard ghusl is where you take a shower with the aim and with the niyyah, with the intent of it being a fard ghusl. So we use water. Now, in terms of the fiqh and in terms of Islamic law, the author here mentions, he says we divide water into three different categories. There's a few, one or two or more extra, but for now we'll just follow the kitab. He mentions the first three, right? Types of water or categories of water, right? Now this for some, again, this might be something that we've overlooked and we don't pay much attention to it, but this is very important. And perhaps, inshallah, after tonight's class, we'll look at water differently. We'll look at when we're taking wudu or taking a ghusl, we'll consider and we'll have more regard for water. Right? The first kind of water or category of water is that we call tahur. Right? Tahur. Now, tahur is water in its natural form that has not been changed by anything. Right? That's the first kind of water. Water in its normal, natural condition or form. And nothing has changed it. Nothing has touched it or has come into contact with it. Right? That's the first category. For example, tahur would be rainwater. When it rains, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down the rain from the heavens down to the earth, and that water that falls when it rains, that is water in its natural form. It's ma'un tahurun, right? If you go to a river that flows, water that flows, the water in the river as it flows to the oceans, as the rain comes down and it falls on the mountains and the mountain tops and the mountain peaks, and it flows down into the valleys and the ravines, and it, you know, ends up creating a river or flowing down into a river. That is all water in its natural form. So rainwater, a river, water in a river, the sea, the ocean, that is clean water. Tahur means water that is clean and that is in its natural state or form. Seawater. If there's a well, and if we dig a well, that water there in the well. If it's a spring, water that flows from a spring. Spring water is also in its natural state. Snow, when it snows. Snow is also water, you know, but it's in the form of snow, but that is in its natural form, as well as when it hails. You know, the hail that comes down, if we put a bucket outside or a drum and we collect all that water, then it's that hail water is clean. It's in its natural form and state. Right. So why do we mention water in its natural state or form? Because if, again, coming back to our question on hadath, if a person has to clean himself, i.e. either has to take wudu, has to perform ablution, or he has to take a fard ghusl, you can only, and I emphasize, you can only take wudu with clean water, meaning water in its natural form or state. You can only take a fard ghusl with clean water, water that hasn't touched anything or wasn't touched by anything, that didn't come into, or nothing unnatural via unnatural means came into contact with that water. That's why it's very important. When taking wudu, it can only be with tahur water, and taking a fard ghusl can only be with tahur water. Right? That is why it is very important. Again, you know, the children of today, they won't be able to understand this and appreciate this. But ask your parents, ask your especially those who have grandparents today, those children, ask Toma right now. Oh, ma, or pa, the grandma, just call them, ask them, when they were children, how did they take wudu? How did their parents teach them how to take wudu and how to take a fard ghusl? Because back in the day, there was no showers like we had today. There was no fancy taps and bathrooms, and especially the showers that we have today wasn't in existence back then. Right? And I would love to hear from our seniors and our elders, especially those 60 years and older, when they were children, how their parents taught them and how their parents did it and how they grew up with it. Because that water should be left untouched. If you're taking a fard ghusl, then you can't touch that water. Nothing can touch that water. They would have a bucket or a jug with water, and they would put a lid on it, or a piece of cloth or something. They would cover it, because nothing can touch that water. That is your mani water. That is your ghusl water. Your fard ghusl water, for example. Okay, again, maybe at another occasion we can explain that a bit more, but this is what we had back in the day. So that's the first category. Right. Now the second category is, we have tahir. Now, tahir water is the second category. Now, tahir water is water that was tahur originally. Meaning, example would be, if it was raining and you collected the rainwater in a bucket, in a jug, or in a Jojo tank, for example. So that rainwater is tahur. And the moment that water gets into contact with something else, it changes from tahur to tahir. Now, tahir means that the water is clean, but because it came into contact with something, it cannot be used to clean. And when we say it cannot be used to clean, it means it cannot be used to clean yourself via taking wudu or via taking a fard ghusl. Whereas the first category is water that is clean and it can be used to clean, which is water in its natural state or form. Two qualities. Water is clean and it has the quality that it can be used to clean, meaning to take wudu, to take abdas and take a fard ghusl. Whereas the second category, the water is still clean, but it cannot be used to clean. For example, if you have a bucket of rainwater, right? You put it outside, you have a bucket, it was raining, you put it outside, the bucket is filled with water. That is water in its true natural condition. It is clean and it can be used to clean. But if you take a teaspoon, or if you add some sugar to the water, or if you add some rose water to it, rose petals, or if you add some oros, or what is there now? Fusion. If you add something to it and it changes the constitution or the dynamics of the water, then it becomes tahir, meaning it is still clean, but it cannot be used to clean. So if you add sugar to the water, it becomes sugar water. If you add rose water to it, it becomes, or rose syrup or the petals, it becomes rose water. So now the question is, when you add something to the water, for example, oros, if you add oros to the water, then the question now is, the fact that you added something to the water, did it change the color of the water, the taste of the water, or the smell of the water? Three very important things. If you add something to clean water, and whatever you added changed the color of the water, the smell of the water, or the taste of the water, then it changes from water in its natural form to tahir water, which is still clean, but you cannot use it to clean. For example, if you add oros to natural water or to clean water, the moment you add oros, it changes the color of the water. It also changes the taste of the water, because now you're not drinking water, you're drinking water mixed with oros, which is now oros water. So you can't take wudu. If you buy a bottle of fusion and you're making on drink, you add water to it, or the fusion to the water, then you sit with fusion water afterwards. You can't then take wudu with that water. Why? The moment you added the sugar or the roses or the oros to the water, it became something else. It changed. One of those three. As long as one of those three elements change, the color of the water, the taste of the water, the smell of the water, then you can't use that oros water to take wudu with. That is why you can't take wudu with rose water, for example. You can't take wudu with salt if you add salt to the water, because it changes the taste of the water. The color still looks the same. Even the smell might be the same. But the moment you taste it, you'll be able to taste whether, for example, the sugar or salt that was added to the water. So you can't take wudu with sugar water. Right? You can't take wudu with flavored water. Like, especially back in the day, there was no such thing. Today, there's lots of flavored waters and etc. So you can't go to the shop and buy a bottle of flavored water and then take wudu with it, or fard ghusl. You can't. Why? It's not water any longer. It has now changed into flavored water. Right? Very important. If the color, taste, or smell of the water change, then the water is still clean. For example, if you made on oros and you're sitting and drinking the oros juice or drink, and some of the oros spills on your clothes, the clothes is clean, right? Clothes is still clean. It's not, doesn't become najis, right? So it's clean from that angle. It's clean, but you can't use that oros now that's mixed with water to take wudu with, right? Now that's the second one. The third one is, which is the easiest one, is where you have normal water, natural water, and najasa falls into the water. So then, when najasa mixes or when najasa comes into contact with clean water, it then stains or it impurifies the clean water. All right? That's the rule. However, we have to take note of the following. We have to take note of the following. Again, when najasa comes into contact with water, we have to see what was the amount of water. What was the amount of water? Whether it was a small amount of water or whether it was a large amount of water. And there's a cutoff, there's a limit, there's a cutoff point that the scholars have identified. Right? In terms of this kitab, the author mentions here, he says, it is a 2 kullas. In Arabic we refer to as kullatain, 2 kullas of water. It is a measurement that was used back in the day by the scholars and by the ulama. So it's a measurement, and it is equal to what we know today as liters. Right? So in terms of liters, it comes to about 216 liters of water. 216. 216. So if najasa falls into a bucket or a body of water, and that water is less than plus minus 200 liters or 216 liters of water, and najasa falls into it, then that whole body of water, that whole 200 liters of water, for example, becomes impure when it comes into contact with najasa, if najasa falls into it. That's the first part. The second part is if the amount of water that we're speaking of, if the body of water is more than 216 liters. If it's more than 260 liters, and najasa comes into contact with that water, which is more than 216 liters, then again we have to take into account the fact that the najasa that came into contact with a body of water, and the body of water is more than 216 liters, did that najasa change the color, the smell, or the taste of the water? If the answer to that question is yes, any of the three, if the answer is yes, then that water becomes najis. All that water. If the color, taste, or smell of the water was not affected, did not change, any of those three things, did not change when it came into contact with najasa, and the body of water is more than 216 liters, then it is regarded as being still clean. Regarded as being clean. Right? Now, 216 liters of water is plus minus when you have, maybe not today you have different sizes and shapes of baths that people have in their bathrooms, but You know, the old standard baths that you would have in the houses. I don't know if there's a word for it now. But if you can picture the normal, you know, the standard size that people would have in the houses. Before all the fancy kinds or types came. That bath is the standard small size one. That is about plus minus 200 liters of water. Or you can say 216 plus minus. So when we say a little water, it means we are referring to a bathtub. A bathtub filled with water. If najasa comes into contact with that, and it's less than the bathtub, then the whole bathtub becomes water that's in the bathtub becomes impure, becomes najis. If the water is more than a bathtub full of water, then you have to ask yourself, did the najasa have the effect of changing the color, the taste, or the smell of the water? That is why sometimes people ask, can you take wudu in a pool? If someone has a pool in their backyard, or you go to the municipal pool or public baths, etc., like the one we have here by in Beach Road, that is what is that, Olympic size? I'm not sure now. Or even person that has a pool in his backyard. What if someone, and not sure if I must use this example, or whether it happens or not, but what if someone, he performs a number one, he urinates in a pool, and people are swimming in the pool? That urine is najasa, is najis, and it came into contact with a body of water. And now the question is, the pool that you have in your backyard, is the amount of water that it takes to fill the pool, is it more than 216 liters or less than 216 liters? And normally if it's a pool in the backyard, the pool is much more than 200 liters. Because 200 liters is about a bathtub full of water. So it's more than that. And now the question is, did the fact that a person urinated in the pool, did that change the color, taste, or smell of the water? If not, then that water is clean. You can continue swimming in it. You can even take wudu in it. If not, or rather, yes, if it didn't change, then the water is clean. If it changed the color, taste, or smell of the water, then that whole body of water then becomes impure. Right? Okay, and then just lastly, the author mentions that we have another category which is called ma'ul musta'mal, which is used water. Right? Musta'mal water is water that was clean, that was used to clean, and hence now we can't use it anymore. Can't use it any longer to clean. After it was used, it lost the quality that the water had of being able to clean something else or someone else. And then you can't use it anymore. You understand? Or does that make sense? So let's use an example. Used water, an example of used water would be where a person takes wudu. So you at home, you take a bucket, you put it underneath the tap or in the bath, or where you're taking wudu, or the tap outside perhaps, and you have a bucket at the bottom, right? That collects all the water that falls down when people open the tap, all that water falls into the bucket over there. Right? Let's say it's in the backyard, so what you do is, you open the tap and you start taking wudu. Right? And as the water comes out of the tap, that is clean water. That's water in its natural form or state. So you can take wudu. So you're taking wudu, and after taking wudu, water that collected fell in the bucket, and let's say the bucket is maybe half full. So all the water that, let's call it the abdas water, the wudu water that you used, the water used when taking wudu, if it's collected and it's there in a jug or in a bucket, then you can't use that same water again in the bucket and give it to someone else to take wudu with. You can't take wudu with that water because it has already been used for wudu. Or if you take a shower and you put a bucket there and you wash yourself, you're taking a ghusl, then that water that collected in the bucket, you can't take that water and give it to someone else to take a ghusl with or to take wudu with. Because after it was used the first time, it lost that quality. So what should we do is, you can take wudu with a bucket underneath, yes, and the water that collected there, you can take that water and you can throw it on your plants, throw it in the backyard, on the garden. You can wash your car with it. You can wash the windows with it, or etc., etc. But you can't use it to take wudu or to take a fard ghusl. Alright? You can, take it to wash the car. Dan het die kar ook mos nou abdas. Ja Allah. Is dit nie? Moenie so synig wees nie. Ons vat abdas, nou laat die kar ook abdas vat. Ja Allah. Of as die tyres van die kar of die wiele, dan ry ons met abdas, die kar ry met abdas, die kar se wiele het abdas. For example. Okay, geef. So again, that brings us to an end to tonight's class, which again was a very important and I hope beneficial lesson, especially with regard to najasa. What is najasa? The physical najasa, physical impurities. What is hadath, which is the ritual impurities, and then the different kinds of water that a person can use and that we can't use. Right? So with these few words, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all the understanding. Wallahu rasuluhu a'lam, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.